Dimensional lumber is the primary material used in the construction of residential and light commercial buildings. So, with that in mind, do you know what dimensional lumber is? Could you explain its makeup or how it's sized and graded? Given the material's significance in the building industry, this is information you need to understand and be able to identify as a construction professional. Because dimensional lumber is primarily used for structural frames, the material is typically produced from softwood trees such as pine and fir. The cell structure of these woods makes them easy to cut and mechanically fasten, while also being high in compression and tensile strength. Dimensional lumber is one of three basic classifications of sawn lumber. And what I mean by sawn lumber is lumber that is milled from harvested trees to specific industry standard dimensions. These dimensions are expressed in two terms, nominal dimension and actual dimension. Now pay attention, here's where it starts to get a little bit tricky. Nominal dimension refers to the designation of the material. The material is produced in 2-inch incremental widths ranging from 2 inches to 12 inches. Now logically, one would expect the lumber's physical size would correspond to its name designation. In other words, what I'm saying is a 2x4 would actually be 2 inches thick by 4 inches wide, and a 2x12 would be 2 inches thick by 12 inches wide. In the early days of the milling industry, this was in fact true. However, advancements in technology over the years reduced the size of manufactured lumber, ultimately allowing manufacturers to net more material from the same size tree. So this means a 2x4, traditionally known to have actual dimensions of 2 inches by 4 inches, now is 1.5 inches thick by 3.5 inches wide. As such, the distinction of nominal versus actual dimension was developed. So, am I saying that all 2x2s to 2x12s are actually 1/2 of an inch smaller all the way around? Well, I'd like to say that's true, but no, that's not. As if it wasn't already confusing enough, we're going to get a little more confusing. The actual dimension for all boards is not reduced by 1/2 of an inch. Once the piece's width, the nominal width, exceeds 6 inches, the actual dimension is then reduced by 3/4 of an inch instead of 1/2 of an inch. So, what we're talking about here is basically all 2x8s to 2x12s are now reduced down to 3/4 of an inch smaller than their nominal width. Thickness, on the other hand, remains constant at 1/2 of an inch for all pieces. So I'm sure that's clear as mud, but you'll figure it out if you watch this a few more times. Now, sizing isn't the only designation with dimensional lumber. It's also defined by quality standards associated with appearance defects such as knots and splits that would limit its use as a finished material. These defects will also determine the structural quality of the board, as they also impact its ability to withstand loads. Through an inspection process conducted visually or by computer, the imperfections are identified and a grade stamp assigned to the piece. While there are various grading classifications, the most common for dimensional lumber are Select Structural, which is the highest quality, and then number 1, number 2, and number 3. Number 3, of course, being the worst of all of them. Now, in terms of use for light structural work, number 2 is actually the most common material used. Now, it may not seem like it on the surface, but this is important information to be aware of. The reason being, architects and engineers will identify within the plans and specifications for a project the minimum lumber grade that will need to be used in a particular application, just as you see here. So, you might understand all of that, but how do you know the correct grading of lumber is being used on a project? Well, this information can be identified through a grade stamp provided on the piece of lumber. In addition to the quality designation, this stamp also identifies the species of wood, the grading authority, and the mill it was produced from. Additionally, it will include information related to moisture content and any treatments performed such as heat treating or pressure treating. Now, let me go back for a second to clarify something with the moisture content. What you see in this example here is this KD that references kiln dried. That is actually identifying that the lumber has been dried under a certain standard in order to get its moisture content down to where it needs to be. If that was not specified, then you would actually see a number in place of the KD, which would typically be 19 or lower, indicating that the moisture content for the board is less than 19%. So what this all means is that we've established an industry-wide quality standard, ultimately protecting manufacturers, designers and engineers, and constructors, but most importantly, protecting building owners against potential defects in their product.